dear students, welcome to this program. Today we are going to discuss second part of methodologies to study gene and gene activity. Before discussing in detail our topic, let us first know its objectives. On completion of this lesson, you will be able to describe the methods of mapping and quantifying transcripts. State the major methods of analyzing the DNA-protein interactions. Note the basic principles of mRNA quantification methods and understand the methods of determining the eukaryotic gene function. Let me begin with techniques that are used for mapping and quantifying transcripts. Mapping transcripts means locating their starting and stopping points, and quantifying them means measuring how much of a transcript exists at a certain time. Molecular biologists use a variety of techniques to map and quantify transcripts. Here, we will discuss S1 mapping. S1 mapping is used to locate the 5' or 3' ends of RNAs and to quantify the amount of a given RNA in cells at a given time. The principle behind this method is to label a single-stranded DNA probe that can hybridize only to the transcript of interest, rather than labeling the transcript itself. The probe must span the sequence where the transcript starts or ends. After hybridizing the probe to the transcript, S1 nuclease is added, which degrades only single-stranded DNA and RNA. Thus, the transcript protects part of the probe from degradation. The size of this part can be measured by gel electrophoresis, and the extent of protection tells where the transcript starts or ends. DNA probe is labeled at its 5' end with radio-labeled phosphate. One can also use S1 mapping to locate the 3' end of a transcript. It is necessary to prepare a 3' end labeled probe and hybridize it to the transcript. One important variation of the S1 mapping is RNase mapping or RNase protection assay. This procedure is analogous to S1 mapping. The probe in this method, however, is made of RNA and can therefore be degraded with RNase instead of S1 nuclease. Now, let us talk about measuring the rate of transcription in vivo. S1 mapping and northern blotting are useful for determining the concentration of specific transcripts in a cell, but they do not tell us the rate of synthesis. To measure transcription rates, we can employ other methods including nuclear run-on transcription and reporter gene expression. Nuclear run-on transcription. The idea of this assay is to isolate nuclei from cells, then allow them to extend in vitro the transcripts they had already started in vivo. This continuing transcription in isolated nuclei is called run-on transcription because the RNA polymerase that has already initiated transcription in vivo simply runs on or continues to elongate the same RNA chains. The run-on reaction is usually done in the presence of labeled nucleotides, so the products will be labeled. Once labeled run-on transcripts have been produced, they must be identified. The easiest way to perform the identification is by dot blotting. Samples of known denatured DNAs are spotted on a filter and this dot blot is hybridized to the labeled run-on RNA. The RNA is identified by the DNA to which it hybridizes. Furthermore, the relative activity of a given gene is proportional to the degree of hybridization to the DNA from that gene. Now, coming to reporter gene transcription. To gain insightful information about the relationship between the activation or inhibition of different pathways and their effects on gene expression, specific response elements are fused to genes encoding reporter proteins. These reporter genes can then be used as indicators in monitoring the transcriptional activity in cells. The most common detectable reporter genes are luciferase, beta-galactosidase, or beta-glucuronidase. Examples of methods used to determine the expressed reporter gene protein are fluorescence. absorbance, and luminescence. Now we will discuss assaying DNA-protein interactions. Many methodologies are used to detect protein-nucleic acid interactions, but here we will briefly describe three important assays: DNA footprinting, gel mobility assay, and chip assay. DNA's footprinting. DNA's footprinting is a method for detecting protein-DNA interactions that can tell where the target site lies on the DNA and even which bases are involved in protein binding. Footprinting assays exploit the fact that a protein which is bound to a specific nucleic acid will interfere with the chemical or enzymatic modification of that DNA fragment. In this sense, it leaves its footprint on the DNA. Thus, the modification can be used to localize the contact area between protein and DNA. Several methods are available, but three are very popular: DNase, dimethyl sulfate, and hydroxyl radical footprinting. For the DNase first footprinting assay, a particular DNA fragment is labeled at one end and mixed with the protein of interest. Following binding, the DNA is treated with the enzyme deoxyribonuclease first, which digests DNA. Performing a partial cleavage without protein produces labeled DNA fragments that cover the entire size range of the original DNA. In the presence of a binding protein, however, protection occurs in a particular region and labeled DNA fragments of the respective length are not produced, while all longer or shorter ones are still present. Two samples are resolved on a polyacrylamide gel side by side. The differences in the resulting ladders of DNA bands is visualized via the incorporated label. Gaps in the band ladder of the sample in which protein had been present indicate binding sites. Comparison of the patterns with sequencing reactions allows the identification of protected sequences with single nucleotide resolution. Electrophoretic mobility shift assay. It relies on the fact that the electrophoretic mobility of a complex of nucleic acid and protein is less than that of the free nucleic acid. Mobility shift assays are often used for qualitative purpose. However, under appropriate conditions, they can even provide quantitative data for the determination of binding stoichiometries, affinities, and kinetics. Now coming to chromatin immunoprecipitation. Chromatin immunoprecipitation is a method to identify DNA-protein complexes that occur in vivo, and currently the standard method for identification of histone modification locations and transcription factor binding sites. Cells are initially treated with a cross-linking agent to link covalently any DNA binding protein to their chromatin. Then the cells are lysed, and this genomic DNA is isolated and sonicated to produce shared chromatin. An antibody specific to the protein of interest is added to the sonicated material and used to isolate the protein with all attached DNA via immunoprecipitation. The DNA is released by reversing the cross-linking and is subsequently purified. The purified DNA is amplified and sequence information is obtained. Now the RNA quantification. Four methods are in common use for the quantification of transcription: Northern blotting, RNase protection assay, real-time polymerase chain reaction, and the microarray assay. Northern analysis that we have already explained in my previous module is the only method providing information about mRNA size, alternative splicing, and the integrity of RNA samples. The RNase protection assay already discussed is most useful for mapping transcript initiation and termination sites and intron-exon boundaries, and for discriminating between related mRNAs of similar size which would migrate at similar position on a northern blot. Real-time PCR is an in vitro method used to detect or quantify the expression of mRNA, often from a small concentration of target RNA. It is the most sensitive and the most flexible of the quantification methods and can be used to compare the levels of mRNAs in different sample populations, to characterize pattern of mRNA expression and to analyze RNA structure. As RNA cannot serve as a template for PCR, the first step in a real-time PCR assay is the reverse transcription of the RNA template into cDNA, followed by its exponential amplification in a PCR reaction. Real-time PCR uses fluorescence detecting thermocyclers to amplify specific nucleic acid sequences and measure their concentration simultaneously. Because the target sequences are amplified and detected in the same instrument, there is no need to withdraw aliquots during the reaction and process them. Instead, the instrument plots the rate of accumulation of amplified DNA over the course of entire PCR reaction. The greater the initial concentration of target sequences in a reaction mixture, the fewer the number of cycles required to achieve a particular yield of amplified product, where the target amplification is first detected. The number of cycles required to achieve this threshold of amplification is called the CT value. Consequently, the greater the quantity of target DNA in the starting material, the faster a significant increase in fluorescent signal will appear, yielding a lower CT value. A plot of CT values against the log of the initial copy number of a set of standard DNAs yields a straight line. The target sequences in an unknown sample may easily be quantified by interpolation into this standard curve. Now coming to microarray technology. Microarray allows quantitative simultaneous monitoring and expression of thousands of genes. DNA microarrays are little more than glass microscope slides studded with a large number of DNA fragments, each containing a nucleotide sequence that serves as a probe for a specific gene. The most dense arrays may contain tens of thousands of these fragments in an area smaller than a postage stamp, allowing thousands of hybridization reactions to be performed in parallel. The basic principle behind microarray is the base complementarity. That is, the base pair A is complementary to T and C is complementary to G. In a microarray, many thousands of spots are placed on a rectangular grid with each spot containing a large number of pieces of DNA from a particular gene. When the sample of interest contains many copies of mRNA, many bindings will occur, indicating that the gene from the transcribed mRNA is highly expressed. The quantity of hybridization can be determined because each copy of mRNA is labeled in the experiment with a fluorescent or radioactive tag, and a brighter signal is detected when more copies bind. Lastly, we will discuss determination of eukaryotic gene function. Ultimately, one wishes to determine how genes and the proteins they encode function in the intact organism. We can often answer this question best by seeing what happens when we create deliberate, targeted disruption of a particular gene in a living organism. First, we will discuss the method of introducing specific mutations into genes in vitro. Later, discuss two widely used techniques for eliminating gene function in vivo. In vitro mutagenesis. A gene can be mutated in a desired way and observe the resulting phenotypic change. A procedure called site-directed mutagenesis allows researchers to make very small specific changes in a DNA sequence, such as the substitution of one base for another, or the deletion or insertion of a very small number of bases. Site-directed mutagenesis is usually accomplished by first synthesizing a DNA oligonucleotide that carries the desired change, allowing this oligonucleotide to hybridize to a single-stranded preparation of the normal DNA, and then using the oligonucleotide as a primer for DNA polymerase. The polymerase elongates the primer by adding nucleotides that are complementary to the normal DNA. The modified DNA can then be cloned and the effect of the genetic alteration determined by introducing the DNA into an appropriate host cell. Now coming to knockouts. The use of gene targeting to evaluate the function of genes in the living mouse is now a routine procedure and is used worldwide. For example, we can disrupt genes in mice, and when we do, we call the products knockout mice. These knockout mice can provide a unique insight into the genetic basis of a human disease, as well as a basis for studying the various cellular activities in which the product of particular gene might be engaged. Now, coming to RNA interference. Researchers are exploiting a recently discovered phenomenon known as RNA interference to inhibit the function of specific genes. This approach is technically simpler than the methods discussed above for disrupting genes. RNA interference refers to the ability of a double-stranded RNA to block expression of its corresponding single-stranded mRNA, but not that of mRNAs with a different sequence. The functions of genes in an organism can be studied by simply introducing an siRNA into the organisms by various means and examining the phenotype of the organism. That results from depletion of the corresponding mRNA. With this, we conclude our today's lecture. Hope you have enjoyed and understood it very well. Thank you.